As far as he can count?
As far as you come down.
Yeah.
Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the December 1st, 2020 meeting of the Wicomico County Legislative Session. We'd like to start the meeting with opening prayer and Pledge of Allegiance. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. This day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thy the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Hurley, will you please read the items on the consent agenda?
Good evening, Mr. President, council members, ladies and gentlemen. On the consent agenda this evening, we have the legislative minutes from November the 17th, 2020, open work session minutes from October the 20th, 2020, pertaining to the GOB roof replacement capital project funding, open work session minutes from October the 20th, on proposed changes to the 20-year concession agreement with Seventh Inning Stretch for the use of the Arthur W. Purdue Stadium, open work session minutes from October the 20th pertaining to the East Side Youth Sports Complex lease agreement, 5-year extension, closed work session minutes from January the 7th pertaining to compensation of an employee, closed work session minutes from March the 3rd, consult with legal counsel, and closed work session minutes from October the 20th to discuss appointments to positions that this public body has jurisdiction.
Need a motion to approve the consent agenda for the minutes.
So moved.
Got a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor for the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Chair votes aye. Consent agenda passes. Ms. Hurley.
Okay, good evening again. The first order of business this evening is the election of officers pursuant to Charter Section 303, which states, at its first meeting in December of each year, the council shall elect from among its members by a vote of the majority of the total number of council members established by this charter, a president and a vice president. The president, or in his absence, the vice president, shall establish the agenda and preside at all meetings. On all questions before the council, the president and vice president shall have and may exercise the vote to which each is entitled as a council member. Tonight we'll be electing the president and vice president. We will start with the nominations for the council president.
I'll nominate Larry Dodd.
A second.
I'll nominate John Cannon.
Second.
Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, due to the fact that we have multiple nominations, the vote will be taken by roll call. I will call the nominees in alphabetical order by their last name. The first person to receive a majority of the votes will be the next council president. Starting with John Cannon, and by roll call, Mr. McCain.
Yay.
Mr. Davis.
Nay.
Mr. Holloway.
Nay.
Mr. Dodd.
Nay.
Ms. Acle.
Nay.
Mr. Hastings.
Yay.
And Mr. Cannon.
Aye.
Okay, we have 4 against and 2 yeses, so that vote fails. Next, we will vote on Councilman Dodd. Mr. McCain.
Nay.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Mr. Holloway.
Yes.
Mr. Dodd.
Yes.
Ms. Acle.
Yes.
Mr. Hastings. And Mr. Cannon.
Aye.
We do have a majority. Councilman Dodd, you are the next council president. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Would you like to ask for the nominations for vice president?
Yes, ma'am. Are there any nominations for vice president?
I'd like to nominate Mr. Holloway.
Do we have a second? Do we have a second?
I don't think a nomination requires a second, Mr. President.
I'm sorry?
A nomination, I don't believe, requires a second, just a vote.
Okay, we got a nomination for Mr. Holloway. Are there any more nominations?
I'll nominate Mr. Cannon.
Okay. All right, we'll do the same thing, go through a roll call. Mr. McCain.
Or who?
We're doing alphabetical order, so this would be Mr. Cannon first. Mr. McCain.
Yay.
Mr. Davis.
Nay.
I didn't hear you.
Nay.
Nay. Mr. Holloway.
Nay.
Ms. Acle. We're voting for Mr. Cannon.
Nay.
Nay. Mr. Hastings.
Nay.
Mr. Cannon.
Nay.
And the chair votes nay. Ms. Hurley?
Got to the next one.
All right.
I
Now,
was confused. I'm sorry, I was distracted. What was that? Who was that for? Was that for me?
That was for you. We read you
I'll change
first.
my-
4 against,
For the
3
record, I'll
for.
change that to it. Yes.
So it's 4-3.
Yeah, we
All right.
still do not have a majority.
So now we're voting on Mr. Holloway, starting with Mr. Kane. Mr. McCain?
Nay.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Holloway?
Yes.
Ms. Acle?
Yes.
Mr. Hastings? Mr. Cannon?
Nay.
The chair votes aye. Ms. Hurley?
You do have a majority on that.
So congratulations, Mr.
Congratulations.
Holloway.
Next on the agenda is Resolution Number 159-2020, and we did receive a request from the County Executive's Office to actually remove this resolution from the agenda. The Pemberton Christmas event will not be held this year. So we're moving to item number 3 on the agenda, which is Resolution Number 160-2020. This is authorizing the acting county executive to accept a grant award from the Maryland Department of Commerce, Maryland Tourism Development Board in the amount of $41,578.67 for the hometown tourism. And we have Mr. Steve Miller here, Director of Recreation, Parks, and Tourism, if there are any questions.
All right, need a motion to approve resolution number 160-2020.
So moved.
You got a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Got a second by Mr. Davis. Any discussion? Any discussion for Mr. Miller? Okay. All in favor of resolution number 160-2020, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Chair votes aye. Resolution number 160-2020 passes unanimously. Ms. Hurley?
Next is Resolution Number 161-2020, authorizing the acting county executive to accept a grant award from the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development in the amount of $300,000 for citizens needing emergency rental assistance. And we have Lori Carter here, Director of Planning and Zoning. She's actually participating remotely. And we have Jesse Drewer, the long-range planner, if there are any questions.
All right, need a motion to approve resolution number 161-2020.
So moved.
Got a motion. Do we have a second? Second. Any discussion? Mr. Drewer, do you want to briefly go over what you have?
Yep, I do. Lori just texted me. She's having some technical difficulties with the Zoom right
don't see
now.
her. That's fine.
So I've got some notes here prepared from her. We just wanted to outline about this specific round of funding is different than the previous 2 rounds that Wicomico County has been awarded. This round is for $300,000, and this funding must be expended by December 30th of this year. Unlike the other funding we have been awarded, this funding will allow us to pay for the current month's rent along with 8 months in arrears going back to April to the pandemic's start. There is no income eligibility requirement, which is different than the other rounds. And this even allows us, if you have a COVID-related illness, that if your partner or you yourself were sick and had to take a time off from job, that is now allowed with this round of funding. And the only thing that is required for this round is a statement from the landlord of how much you are in arrears. And there is no non-eviction clause with this round. And we are accepting applications pending acceptance here on a first-come, first-served basis because it is only $300,000.
Right. Do we have any questions or comments for Mr. Drewer? Mr. Holloway?
I suppose you won't have any problems spending this, from what I hear. Is that correct?
We do not have any issues expending it right now. We have over 150 applications in the waiting process with Salisbury Neighborhood Housing. They have been overwhelmed with this round because it allows us to help the city of Salisbury compared to previous rounds of funding. So we expect to have no issues expending it by the December 30th deadline.
Is this assistance for a full month, or is just a partial payment to help, or what?
It can be anything if you're behind for a partial month, depending upon the landlord, how they do it. Some landlords do weekly, we found, doing this, so it's however far in arrears you are behind. Any portion, we can go up to 9 months if you include December.
Thank you.
Ms. Acle?
You answered my question, if this included the city of Salisbury.
Okay, yep.
Yeah, I thought the big question too was, will you be able to spend the money in less than 30 days? 150 applications seems like a lot, and I don't know what they have to do to process it, but I guess they have the staffing?
Yes, right now, the $200,000 is going to Salisbury Neighborhood Housing, and this round is different than the other rounds. We are not requiring home inspections, and that's going to lighten up the process too, and there is far less paperwork involved, because there's no tax returns required, no income paperwork, all of that stuff that tends to take time to process. We are not requiring that this round for the state.
Okay.
Yep.
Have you spent the previous money that you received?
We've spent about $56,000 of the previous round of funding that we've already received, and it's taking a little bit longer for the first round because that is exclusively to Wicomico County and not the city residents. And we've been getting a lot of applications for that, which is where the wait list for this round is coming from.
So if it's going through Salisbury Neighborhood Housing Services, that means homeowners as well as renters get to take advantage of this?
It's only for renters.
It's only for renters?
Yeah, it is not for mortgages.
But they're handling it?
Yes,
Okay.
they're handling $200,000 of it, and Habitat for Humanity and the local management board each are getting $50,000 of the funding.
Do you have any idea why homeowners aren't eligible? Because they're struggling too.
We have not gotten any guidance from that. It's been requested multiple times from the Department of Housing and Community Development, but right now, their only guidance from HUD is that this money is for renters only.
Okay.
Yep.
I hate to see a lot of foreclosures.
Yep.
Any more questions for Mr. Doerr? All right. All those in favor of resolution number 161-2020, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Chair votes aye. Resolution number 161-2020 passes.
Mr. President?
Yes, sir.
I abstain.
You abstained?
Yes.
Okay, you got one abstention. Resolution 161
I
passes.
also abstain.
And we have another abstention. So that's two abstentions, Ms. Acle and Mr. Cannon. So the resolution still passes. Thank you, Mr. Doerr.
Thank you.
Ms. Hurley?
Mr. Dodd, that's all I have.
You don't have number 5?
Oh, I'm sorry. We do have one more under my name. That is resolution number 162-2020. This is to approve Kevin Karpinski Esquire and Karpinski, Cornbrooks, and Carp, PA, as special legal counsel for Wicomico County on matters relating to the FOP collective bargaining and personnel manual revisions. And we have Mr. John Psota here, acting county executive, if there are any questions.
I need a motion to approve resolution number 162-2020.
So moved.
Got a motion by Mr. Kane. Do we have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Davis. Any discussion? Any discussion? All those in favor of resolution number 162-2020, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Chair votes aye. Resolution number 162-2020 passes unanimously. Mr. Taylor.
Good evening. Two matters for introduction tonight. This would be first reading. The first is legislative bill number 2020-14. It is introduced by the President of the Council at the request of the acting county executive. It is an act to reorganize and transfer the county payroll functions and payroll personnel from the direction and control of the Department of Human Resources to the direction and control of the Department of Finance. And I didn't Pam Oland. Oh, there she
Yes.
is. Okay, I'm sorry. Tonight, if there's to be any discussion, I'll let her handle that.
Okay. Need a motion to introduce legislative bill 2020-14.
So moved.
Got a motion by Mr. McCain. Do I have a second by Mr. Holloway?
Second.
Although, any discussion on this first? Any discussion? All those in favor of introducing legislative bill 2020-15, please say aye.
Aye.
Let me correct that. That would have been number 14, legislative bill 2020-14. So all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Chair votes aye. Ms. Hurley?
We can have the public hearing on this bill on January the 5th at 6 p.m.
January 5th at 6 p.m. Okay, thank you. Mr. Taylor again?
Yes, second and last item is legislative bill number 2020-15, also introduced by the President of the Council at the request of the acting county executive. It is an act to amend Chapter 15 titled Emergency Management to provide for Article 4-911 telephone systems to comply with the Maryland Code, and I did see Dave Shipley. He's here, if there's to be any discussion on that.
Okay. Need a motion to introduce legislative bill 2020-15.
So moved.
Got a motion by Mr. McCain. Do we have a second?
Second.
Got a second by Mr. Davis. Any discussion? Any discussion? Mr. Shipley, are you going to be able to start enforcing this right away?
Yes.
Okay. Any more discussion? All those in favor of legislative bill 2020-15, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Chair votes aye. Legislative bill 2020-15 passes unanimously. Ms. Hurley?
We can also hold the public hearing on this bill on January the 5th at 6 p.m.
January 5th at 6 p.m. Okay. At this time, we have public comments. Please limit all public comments to 3 minutes or less. Any presented material may be submitted to the council members. Please include 10 copies. If you have anything, please go to the podium and state your name. Do you have any public comments? Is there anyone out in the hall?
No.
Thank you, Mr. Psota. All right, that closes public comments. At this time, we have council comments. Do we have council comments? Ms. Acle.
Two things. I wanted to say that I had several citizens inquire about the repair on Barron Creek Road, and I'm hoping that we will have a start and finish date on that soon. I also wanted to thank President Dodd and Vice President Holloway for stepping up and taking these leadership positions. We've had a very difficult year with a lot of tough decisions, so I appreciate you both doing so.
Thank you. Any more council comments?
Yes.
Mr.
Go ahead,
Holloway.
Josh.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to mention, last week we had one of our EMS personnel from Parsonsburg who responded to a call, and he was brutally attacked by one of the people on the scene, had to receive stitches in his head. I hope that in the future people will respect these people and the job they're doing. Not all of them, but some of them are volunteers. I don't know if this fellow was paid or a volunteer. He might have been in a volunteer position when he did this, but I think that's pretty low of somebody that would treat somebody who's there to give care and assistance to somebody. So I hope people in the future will show more respect to these folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holloway. Mr. Hastings.
I just want to say, first of all, folks may not know behind the scenes, but Keith Acle, one of the individuals, PAC 14, who takes care of putting these meetings and getting them out to the public, he was retiring, and it's kind of a surprise, but he's been highly loved and appreciated for some time, not just by the Wicomico County Council, but the city and many other folks. So to all the folks at PAC 14, I just want to say thank you, but especially to Keith for all the hard work. Two other quick things. Today is Giving Tuesday, by the way. If you have not given, please go ahead and support your local nonprofit. We got a lot of good ones. Community Foundation's done a great job putting together their annual event. And then last thing on somber note, COVID-19 is still a big, obviously, shows no signs of slowing. We have nearly 60 deaths so far of Wicomico County residents, and including an individual we just found out who many of us have all worked with, and my own day job I work with, and others, Ken Hooper. So my thoughts go out to him, to Bethany and the family, and so many others who are struggling out there now. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Hastings. You have any more council comments? Okay, moving on. This time, I would like to say that the year 2020 has been a rough year for the entire county, the county council, and it was a bad year for me to be president, but with the help of all the council members and the staff, like Ms. Hurley, Ms. Sandy, Mr. Hitchens, the council attorney, and even working with the county executive's office, we got through it. And I look forward to 2021, and hopefully we'll be done with COVID-19, and things will get a lot better in this county. So thank you very much. At this time, need a motion to adjourn from legislative session and go into open work session.
So moved.
Got a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, this time we're going to go into open work session. Do we have the individuals for Horizon here?
Mr. President,
Yes, ma'am.
can we take a 2-minute recess so I can switch out the laptops?
Yes, you guys can get seated if you want, whoever's going to come up. Then we'll take a 2-minute recess. Executive, Mr. Psota, he's requested a presentation on the Horizon program. So if you would, state your names and then go ahead and begin the presentation.
Good evening, everyone. John Psota, Acting County Executive. In recent meetings with Acting Mayor Julia Glantz and Deputy City Administrator Andy Kitzrow, they have shared a request for Wicomico County's support for a real property tax program called Horizon, or Hotel or Residential Incentive Zone, located within Salisbury's downtown district. The primary goal is to accelerate the construction or expansion of hotel or multifamily residential development and to increase economic activity in accordance with their planned strategy as proposed in their Envision Salisbury Master Plan. I would point out that in discussions that we have had with the city, it is understood that the tax incentive proposed would be on the improved property value. Therefore, the current assessed value prior to any redevelopment would continue to be taxed. As a result, the county would not be foregoing any current property tax. Additionally, there would be a reevaluation of the continuance of the tax incentive after 3 years, should certain benchmarks be reached. After tonight's presentation, I would ask that the council consider by consensus approving a resolution of support for this zone and joining Salisbury as they seek enabling state legislation to establish the Horizon. This prospective resolution of support would not obligate the county to the Horizon program. I would like to welcome Salisbury's Acting Mayor Julia Glantz and Deputy City Administrator Andy Kitzrow.
Okay.
Good evening, Council. Thank you so much for having us and letting us share our plan for the county, hopefully, with the Horizons package. Andy Kitzrow, our Deputy City Administrator, has been the brain behind the operation and has done tremendous work developing this proposal. So I'm going to let him lead, and I'll interject as necessary. So, Andy, if you would.
Thank you all. Good to see everybody. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy holidays. As mentioned, I'm Andy Kitzrow. I'm the Deputy City Administrator. So the Horizon program, I appreciate Acting County Executive John Psota for giving a great overview, so that'll save me a couple of items. But what I wanted to do is really quickly go through the high-level ideas behind the Horizon program that is in this PowerPoint presentation and understanding how we got to where we are and why we are here. I know some people have heard bits and pieces of the program, but this will be a good opportunity for me to just hear it directly from the source on what we're proposing. So as mentioned, it's the Hotel or Residential Incentive Zone, and that's how we come up with the Horizon acronym. So overall, tax incentives, why are they needed? What warrants them in certain areas? Well, the goal is to incentivize people through tax breaks, tax abatements, to do something, whether to relocate a business, relocate where they live. And the goal here, not only in Salisbury, but to have people relocate to Wicomico County. Choose to live here, choose to play here, choose to build a business here, rather than Worcester County, Sussex, or other surrounding counties. One of the reasons that we've looked at Salisbury is it's the core of the county. The downtown area, and being the county seat, it is the core of development and the largest city within the county. So there are some existing tax incentive programs that exist. You may be familiar with them, but I'm going to highlight some of these items real quickly. The Enterprise Zone, which a lot of people hear about, is a state initiative, Maryland Enterprise Zone. It's specifically focused on commercial areas within the state of Maryland. Notice the areas in pink do cover most of the downtown area. Thank you, Craig. Do cover most of the downtown area. However, the issue with this is it's a restricted area to just commercial development. And the goal of the Horizon program is targeting residential development, not commercial development. So the Enterprise Zone would not qualify for majority of the targeted programs that were, developments that we're looking at. Some other people may be familiar with the Rise Zone program. And this gives you a little bit of description of the Rise Zone program. It's an economic revitalization tool at our disposal. However, unfortunately, it goes from the university all the way up to the wrong side of the river. So we do not actually have the Rise Zone that reaches into the downtown Salisbury core, which is what we've been focusing on. So we would not be able to take advantage of the Rise Zone program with where we're targeting our residential development. Some other big programs that people think about, a pilot, it's a payment in lieu of taxes. This is an interesting way that governments use to help offset some property taxes. And then you have the TIF, a tax incremental financing. The pilot may work, but it's very unique to each specific project. You still would need some enabling legislation, and it's not an all-encompassing. So we would be having to negotiate with each individual development with different terms, and at this point, we're not necessarily looking to do that. The current pilots that the city does offer in the downtown market are for market rate housing or student housing. The TIF, or some people know it as a TIF district, is a public financing option that is available and specifically to help subsidize redevelopment, infrastructure, and community improvements. These can be very cumbersome and they're very specific. So the tax dollars that you would have to create or that you would generate from that would go specifically into infrastructure project, in a sense, earmarking the revenue that you would be collecting. Moreover, typically with the TIF district, all properties would receive the incentive rather than targeted projects. And Horizon, which I'll get into, is targeting very specific styles of projects. Mm-hmm. So right here, this is the area that the Horizon Zone would be targeting. It is two of the downtown business, zoning districts, including the Central Business District and the Riverfront Redevelopment District. The 7 stars that are indicated and highlighted on there are 7 major, and when I say major, over $10 million potential developments, and a $10 million, not just in a loan in the overall property value, but an increase in assessed value of it that exceeds $10 million. Some of these are currently in the pipeline, some have been in the pipeline and are coming soon to be out for bid. This is how we came to choosing the area. We've got people who are interested in developing in the core of the county, right in downtown, and we wanted to incentivize these developments to see them move forward. Here's some eye candy for everybody. The Ross, 86 units, 300 beds, Salisbury Town Center. Another 290 individuals. The Marina Landing, upwards of 80, 90 people. Downtown oh man, this thing is twitchy. Downtown Lofts, 500 Riverside, Salisbury Marketplace. Beautiful redevelopment projects. Of these right here, of these 6 projects, they're in excess of $75 million and also over 750 occupants. We actually updated those numbers with some of our future projections including Lot 10, and what is potentially able to be done on 500 Riverside with this type of incentive. And those numbers are closer to over $100 million of an increased assessed value, with over 1,000 occupants living in downtown in this area, with a potential additional tax revenue of $1 million a year. So why residential multifamily downtown? Well, as you all know, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and its impact of COVID-19 has really been impacting the development world, where they are looking for some additional options to help them with their long-term economic recovery and navigate some of their development decisions. As mentioned, it is part of our master plan that we adopted in 2016, and it is one of our strategic goals. And then also infill and construction, it's an important piece to when we think about redevelopment of doing infill construction. It usually is the least burdensome on your current services. Real quick, we're looking at a 20-year term. You can see the term summary of what the credits would be. Years 1 through 5 is 100%, 6 through 10 is 80%, and so forth. The revenue potential for a project that's $10 million is almost $1.1 million. A $20 million project, you could be looking at $2.1 million. Of those 6 projects, every single one of those qualifies for over $10 million, with a couple of those exceeding the $20 million threshold. So we're talking about a lot of money. The couple other items I wanted to go over outside of that PowerPoint presentation would be some of the specifics about the program. We came up with the 20-year, and this should have been in your packet. Within the program application, the way that this would roll out is an eligible development project, somebody who is interested in taking advantage of this incentive program would apply similar to the way that they apply currently for like an enterprise zone tax credit. They would apply to the city and they would apply to the county to see if they qualify. We have our eligibility requirements already outlined, which are included in your program packet. And those who would qualify and agree to the terms of the application and the agreement would then qualify for the full term of the 20 years incentive program. I can go into details about the actual program. I'm going to table that for a minute because I want to come back to that. But I also want to help everybody understand, as Mr. Psota talked about, what are the next steps legislatively. We are looking for the city currently passed a resolution on November 23rd supporting this program, and we're looking for the county to do something very similar, supporting this resolution. The next step after that, we would have to go to the state to create state enabling legislation to be able to have tax incentives for residential development in target areas. Once that's approved, then we'd then be able to codify through an ordinance the program and then start accepting applications and move forward with our development goals. As Mr. Psota did mention, there is some oversight throughout the process. We have a 10-year sunset on this program that we were proposing with a 3-year reevaluation of the program. So if we wanted to ramp up the incentive, reduce the incentive, change the terms, we could definitely do that. Additionally, at any time through resolution, one of the councils would be able to suspend their participation in the Horizon program and therefore not allowing any new applications to be presented. Additionally, these can exist unilaterally. If the city set up the Horizon program and the county chose not to participate, it could still exist and people could still receive a property tax credit on their city property tax and vice versa. I think what I'd like to do is pause for a moment and see if there's any questions at this time or things I can help clarify before I go into any more details. And if
Do we have any questions for Mr. Kitzrow at this time? Mr. McCain.
Yeah, a couple questions, Andy, and thanks for the information and the summary. That's very helpful. You mentioned that it has a sunset provision after 10 years, and that sliding scale encompasses a 20-year time frame. But once it's implemented, is it basically, I mean, we got this 20 years, but we got this 10-year sunset. So I guess the fact that even though it sunsets, it still continues.
That's correct. The 10-year sunset is for applications, new applications.
Okay.
And then 20 years is the term of the program. Additionally, with 3 years, one of the reasons for the 3-year reevaluation and the 10-year sunset, we've got people who are interested now. We want to give them a very lucrative opportunity to build now. We want to get things moving. We think it's great for the county to start seeing some of this development now. And we can't guarantee it a decade from now. We may not be able to guarantee it 3 years from now. So get in now is kind of what we're pushing.
Well, actually see, one of the bullet points says that the council may approve modifications to the program and suspend or terminate the continuance of the program at any time by resolution. So
I think, the goal is to get folks in now, to build, to see development, to see a continued revitalization of downtown. We just spent $12 million on our Main Street. We want people to come and enjoy it and use it and have more businesses and restaurants and heads and beds downtown. But, if we saw every development that Andy showed, those 7 stars, come in tomorrow and they started building, in a year from now, we'd cut it off because there wouldn't be any more need for it. And we don't want to, continue to give those breaks if we don't need to. We feel we need to right now because some of these projects are struggling to meet that next hurdle. And we don't want to be sitting here, 10 years down the road and thinking back, we should have done this while we had the chance to get these buildings off the ground.
And this is pretty typical in a lot of downtown redevelopments. In fact, I like to use a lot of times the example of Greenville, South Carolina. I don't know if anyone's ever had the opportunity to go there, but it's almost a mirror image of Salisbury because they have a river that runs through the middle of the town. And, there was you go back 15, 20 years ago, the downtown was just, nothing was going on. And guess what? All their shopping is 3 or 4 miles north on the interstate, just like our retail area, north of our downtown. But, they provided incentives to those initial developers, to get them in there, to get 3 or 4 major projects started. Then after that, they didn't have to do it anymore because now all the investors wanted to be in Greenville, and now it's a huge success story. But you always need that incentive in the beginning to provide the motivation for people to invest.
I appreciate those comments. Just to continue with that thought, there is that domino effect of development that, there's got to be someone first through the door, but then other people will follow. And what's not highlighted in here is also the residual effects. When you put $100 million of new property in a core, all the surrounding property taxes or values will increase. It's the idea of the rising tide. All ships rise with the rising tide. And then finally, I want to be clear, this is a signature program targeting very lucrative projects, $10 million or larger. These aren't small remodels, small fixes. Those are able to move forward. They are moving forward right now. They don't need the incentive. We're incentivizing the big ones, the type of development that redefines a city or redefines an area, turns businesses who may want to relocate into a county or suburbs surrounding a city because of what their vibrant downtown looks like.
So if
Mr.
I
Holloway.
understood what you just said, you're looking for a tax incentive for these new projects. The one we're talking about mainly, I guess, is the Ross. That's who we've heard mostly about in the past few weeks.
If I could, many of these projects are at the door, knocking up. They're talking to investors. They're trying to. I think the Ross project is the furthest along, and it's been the splashiest, so it's in our face. But Lot 1, Deverco, the Marina project, Lot 16 on the river, and then the Ross. They're all ready to go.
But what's instigated this is the Ross project. That's what we've heard. I mean, that's correct?
It's a piece of it, but
Yeah.
it's certainly,
But
we're in challenging times and everybody needs some
What
help.
Andy just said, we're going to you're asking for a tax break for these buildings that's going in, but the taxes on other buildings near them may increase because of the values of the property. So we're going to give tax breaks to the people building the new buildings. The people that own the buildings that's been there and been paying taxes all these years are going to have to pay more taxes, correct? Because they're
That's how property values increase,
Yeah.
right?
Sure, but when you see your home tax assessment go up, it hurts when you write that bill, but when you're ready to sell, it's a good thing.
Well, that's right, but the people, not everybody sells.
Sure, but they will see residual impact and benefit with having 1,000 new folks living in our core, spending their money. And I would like to just hit on the fact that we're asking, the city council has adopted this. Once the state hopefully enables us to do this project, this program, the city will adopt an ordinance to do that. And we hope the county will come along and do that as well. But what I think is important is to look at this as a glass half full and not a glass half empty. Because, we could sit here all day and wish and hope for all of these developments to come in. They may on their own, they may not. We don't think they will at the pace that we'd like them to right now. So it is important that we put this forward, and the city is the one, the majority of the tax dollars, that are going to be paying for the services of the folks that are living downtown are the city tax dollars. I don't think there is going to be a large impact on the county tax roll, because the services that are being provided by any one of these developments is water and sewer. We have the capacity. Police and fire, those are our tax dollars. These aren't going to be people who have lots of children that are impacting our school system. They're going to be majoritarily healthy, because many of them will be in a younger age bracket as well, living in apartments in downtown. So the risk, so to speak, from, in my view, seems to be limited. So I just wanted to share that perspective of looking at it half full. It will be tax dollars that are new to the county without a lot going out for services.
Any more questions?
If I
Mr.
could.
Cannon.
How would you maybe fashion this? Would this be similar to the with what we do right now, whereas the city usually goes through the process of it with the enterprise zone, and then it comes to the county council for their blessing on that? Or do you see that the county would have a completely separate set of guidelines and applications?
The easiest way is if there are mere applications or one application with potentially a couple modifications or plus-ups or subtractions, we would do the heavy lift and say, we've approved this, this has been approved by the city, and then the county would then receive that. So like we do with the enterprise zone, which right now seems to be a pretty smooth transition, it would follow suit.
Okay.
Mr. Cannon, to answer your question more directly, I think the county could implement a different program. What we're going to the state for is the ability to have a tax incentive program for residential properties and hotels. What that looks like, what we're going to put in place is the Horizons program. The county could do something a little differently if they wanted to. We hope you'll do something.
Okay. I think I like this. At first, I had some reservations. Because I don't really believe in government getting too involved in helping to subsidize projects to a certain extent. But to me, this really isn't a situation where we're actually subsidizing anything. We're simply forgiving money that we don't even have yet. And we wouldn't have that money if it weren't for the growth that these projects would create. So in a sense, what our primary goal is as a council, what our primary goal is to be pro-business and be pro-growth and proactive to begin with. And that's what I think the city's done, and I applaud you for this. We talk about that all the time, about the fact that we don't want to raise taxes, but we want to increase the tax base. Well, this does increase the tax base. It's actually one of the first tangible products that's come before this county where we can actually participate in helping to create that growth. Joe, I understand your reservations about businesses downtown, but if you actually talk to the people who are in downtown, the businesses that are downtown, what they want more than anything is some catalyst to make downtown grow. They're very excited about what they've done, what the city's done on Main Street. They're very happy about that, and I think would welcome this with open arms as far as seeing the city grow, and how the city grows. I think really benefits the county as a whole. We're looking at revenues right now, as I understand it. With those all total projects right now, it's about $25,000 that we're bringing in. And yet when you develop these projects and you create the incentives, this county, just the county alone, is going to see hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue, which the entire county can benefit from. I think that's what we need to look at. Julie, you were talking about half empty and half full. The half full size is we don't look at what money the county would lose if we gave them tax breaks. We look at how much money we're going to be getting every year that we create viable projects. And that's what this does.
Well, I understand your enthusiasm, John, but I think Andy made the statement that, or maybe Julia did, that these would not come unless we give this abatement?
We don't know. And it's one of those things, if you build it, will they come? Is it a field of dreams or not? What we do know is, other than the River Place on Riverside, we have not seen any large-scale development in this area in over 20 years. Why? And some of these projects have been in the works for going on 5-7 years without real movement. Why? And talking with them, and I don't want to speak out of turn for them, some of them are here, is something like this, when you start getting into the size and scope projects that we are looking at, this extra bump, this nudge is what gets them to that finish line. It starts to make their private equity investments in some of these people. It starts to cash flow in a way where people will put in this type of money. Again, I don't want to speak on behalf of the developers, and I'm not necessarily a finance person, but yeah, I mean, it's Joe. I don't know.
I was looking through some of the emails I got and about prospective investors. And there was some pretty good promises made about returns on their investment. And I'm just wondering, should that be what we're financing or giving tax abatements for, is to ensure better returns on somebody's investment? I mean, is this more or less like a bailout for a developer to get them to come? Is that where we're at?
Well, I guess that's a good question. I mean, to get them to come, and again, speaking from just discussions I've had, when you start to look at private equity and people who have that type of money, they don't have boundaries. So they can invest their several $1 million in Salisbury, Salt Lake City, Greenville, South Carolina. Who's going to give them the best return is where they're going to invest their money. So do we want to attract that type of business, or do we not? And I think that's why it's as lucrative as it is to be able to help them decide, well, I'm going to go where who's going to give me the best incentive. So it's a strategy.
It sounds to me like they've already decided this one project to come to Salisbury. I mean, they purchased the property and tore the buildings down that were already there. So, I think that decision's been made as far as that property goes anyway. Now, the other projects I don't know about, but, like I say, this thing's been centered around this one project so far. So I'm just saying that. I mean, the decision's been made to build it, and now folks are coming to us asking us to do a tax abatement.
Well, I think it's important to note that we had a pandemic that came in the middle of it, which shook up some things financially. For this program, for the project you're speaking of specifically, and others. We didn't expect that.
There's a construction boom going on all over the country. There's not much of a holdback on construction. Go buy two before, you'll find out.
Well, I can't speak to that. All I know is that from the conversations we've had, we have been pushing and pushing to make these developments happen as much as we can from, the city side of things, and nudging them as hard as we can. You ask any of them how annoying we are. We want to see these projects happen, and they haven't. And I don't think they've just been holding out. I don't think Devrico has been holding out for something better. I think they just have been struggling to get over that finish line. And, I think the question is, what does the county have to lose? If we sit back and do nothing, maybe we'll get 100% of it over 20 years in the future, or we won't. But we can guarantee, that many of these projects are going to happen with this program. We've spoken to them, we've spoken to their investors. it is cash in now. Half of it, would you rather have 50 cents or none? You know, but I don't see what is to lose here. And I would like to share that the business community in Salisbury and in Wicomico County are behind this and think it is good for business, and that, you know, heads in beds in any area, it makes the rest of the dollar turn.
Okay, Mr. Hastings has been waiting on the sidelines.
Well, thank you, first of all, for both of you for being here. As the council representative that represents the majority, a good amount of the city, I just say this is an exciting time to be a Salisbury resident. You know, today I was walking around downtown, and I happened to actually be walking by Mojo's, and you know, they're struggling business. They need density. They need folks down there now. And you know, with COVID, they have to, you know, you have to spread apart. They needed this 6 years ago. This is really exciting to see. This is, in my view, I mean, well, in all of our views, this is construction jobs. This is, you know, this is the future to really put Salisbury on the map. I'm really, you know, I gotta hand it to both of you and to the city of Salisbury for, you know, for helping lead this. There's not a city in the state of Maryland that is more focused on trying to make sure that they grow their businesses in their downtown than what Salisbury is doing. And this is just another example of what we're doing. So I thank the business community who's already, you know, who's worked really hard to try to make sure this happens. Mr. President, I just had a couple clarifying questions very quickly. What I had heard before was also that this is, as far as taxes, folks often reach out like, oh, you know, there's some rich company, they're not going to be paying taxes. To be clear, would they be paying taxes as they are and unimproved for this period of time, right?
What is currently the taxes that are being paid would continue to be paid, period. It is only for the improvements. The increase to the assessed value is what receives the credit. What's interesting, though, is several of these potential developments are on city parking lots that receive zero. So you only go up from there.
The other question, by the way, if we move forward tonight with a resolution of support, this is not the end. That's not the end all be all, correct? And just to reiterate again, the next steps, this goes to the General Assembly.
Yeah, so what we're asking for you primarily this evening is a resolution of support saying that you'd like to see this enabling legislation at the state level. That's it for tonight. We would take it to the state. They would hopefully adopt it because both of our councils and administrations are behind this. Come April, once this is passed, the city council would create our own ordinance enabling this program on the city side, and we would hope that the county would do the same. But tonight, we're just asking for a resolution of support.
And then last thing is, just to make sure I'm hearing this right, at any point in time after, let's say we do move forward, any council can go ahead and suspend, by simple resolution, they can suspend activities they feel like this is not something that's beneficial, or if they feel like, you know, the folks are getting a raw deal, or business owners aren't, you know, are getting too much of an issue for them, we can then immediately suspend that, correct?
You can suspend any future applications. You'd still have to continue with the agreements that are already in place, correct? But you could suspend. Also, it is still an application process. Every project still has to be approved on the merits of each individual project. So once you create the ordinance, it doesn't mean the floodgates open and everybody can do what they want to. You still have checks and balances along the way.
In that case, I just want to say thank you again for all the folks who are trying to help make this happen, or these kind of things. We really need jobs. We're likely heading into a recession. You know, this is a time where we really need to run as fast as we can towards good economic development inside the growth area. And I think you all are trying to help make that happen. So thank you.
I have to point out that this is a work session, so we can't have any formal action tonight.
Hey, Council President, can I make one more comment? Because this came up in the City Council, and I didn't get to mention it in my comments here.
Sir.
This isn't the only program that can exist. I know we were focusing on signature pieces of development in the core of downtown Salisbury, but we also understand that it's important to look outside of the core and look into our neighborhoods and look at other opportunities that exist to be able to incentivize or to be able to support growth and programs and things. So though this is what we're coming before you, it is not the only path forward when you're looking at and thinking about a county. You know, we are focusing on Salisbury, but this can exist this same program can exist elsewhere, various versions of this, or completely separate programs. So it's not this or nothing. It can be a variety of opportunities. And that was brought up in our meeting, so.
Mr. Holloway, do you have another question? Ms. Hastings or Ms. Acle?
Don't tell my wife.
Watch out.
Thank you both for coming. I really appreciate you coming in and giving this very detailed explanation. And I like the thought of the county and the city working collaboratively towards a common goal. Two questions that came up with the enterprise zone. Is there any way we could do a residential zone?
This is,
You can, in a theory, create a residential zone that can have any type of eligibility requirements. This is a very specific, high-valued residential zone tax credit program. $10 million in these two districts, very finite pieces of our larger map, but you can create any sort of, which we are even exploring in different capacities if we wanted to target redevelopment within neighborhoods or a larger area. The enterprise zone expands vastly larger than what we're targeting right now. So you can.
So just to clarify, what we're going to the state to ask for is enabling legislation to do tax incentives for residential properties. That is as simple as it is. What we decide to do with it after, you could do something in District 2 that incentivized residential development. Or Mr. Dodd's district. It doesn't have to, I mean, we're asking for this, but you could add on and do your own thing countywide if that is your goal, to answer your question.
But for this particular project, would it be just similar to the enterprise zone, but residential zone?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then you had mentioned the sunset clause. That was 3 years?
Sunset means the program unless reinstituted.
I know what it means. What are the years?
10 years.
The 3 years, we'll reevaluate it. So if we see an influx of development and we say, okay, we don't need this, it's happening on its own, we've done what we wanted to have happen, we'll cut it off. The sunset is just for developers to get in. Say the Lot 1 development gets in and then they don't do anything. They sit on it for whatever reason. They've got 10 years to do that.
So would you consider doing shorter term, maybe 1 year sunset clause?
Good question. The city is not interested in doing it that short, but again, the county can make a decision, understanding how long it takes for development to happen and from lining up financing to actually certificate of occupancy. You're looking at 2.5 years. So 1 may be aggressive. That's why we have that 3-year kind of that initial phase. No matter what, we're going to reevaluate it and say, is 20-year term, is this the tax schedule too lucrative, not good enough? So we're going to definitely take a look at it 3 years from now, which I would say is the shortest you'd want to go, with a hard 10 years, similar to like the enterprise zone. We may choose to change the entire program, completely suspend it after 10 years. But again, it's for the developer or the community to understand, like, get in now, here's the opportunity. Things may change immediately, 3 years, or definitely 10 years.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Holloway.
Anybody that's paid attention to me since I've been on the council knows that I'm probably the largest supporter of tax cuts and, no higher taxes. All these council people that's been here for a long time has heard me say that. But I also believe in fairness. The orchards, when it was built, was it given a tax abatement?
I don't believe so.
I don't think so. Did they pay for having their water and sewer hooked up and for infrastructure? I think they did. And they're making it. They're there. They didn't get that. So, to say that this won't happen unless you give a tax abatement, I think is, it might not happen with the people that's doing it now, but it could happen anyway with somebody else. Infrastructure is built on need. And if people see the need and see the way they can make money, they're going to go for it. Now, I don't blame them for wanting a tax abatement. I mean, you can't blame them for that. But somebody's got to make up the difference. And Wicomico County has got obligations that the city doesn't have. We got the Board of Education. We got a detention center out there. So, that's something that the city doesn't pay for. And we have the state's attorney's office. That's something the city doesn't pay for, that we fund. So there's a little bit of difference in the funding part of it when we have to fund things that the city's not funding. And it's a little easier, I think, for you guys, the city, to say, okay, we'll do a tax abatement to get somebody to come downtown. I don't blame you for doing it. But I don't know what to say to, when I'm looking at this Ross project, and I look at one of these pages and I see this big room full of exercise machines, when somebody asks me, how come my taxes keep going up, but this big building's built downtown and they get a tax break? Why aren't I getting a tax break? So I've got reservations about it. I think you know that. Anyway.
Mr. Dodd, just a couple
McCain, yes,
couple
sir.
quick questions, kind of getting back to what I said earlier. And I guess also I'll respond a little bit, 'cause, I mean, Joe, I get your points and, I understand that concern. But when you look at the examples like the Orchard, they chose not to go downtown. They chose to go where they went because of the proximity to the college and also the relationship with the college, and as well as the other projects that were built around that same time. But none of those chose to go downtown, which once again kind of gets to the importance of, incentivizing. It's a little bit downtown redevelopment 101 from the standpoint of all downtown redevelopments almost. When you look across the country, you can just pick at random. They all began with some kind of incentives. I mean, that's why when you had your slide up earlier, you were talking about TIFs and enterprise zones and pilots. All of these have come out of that. I mean, they're all designed to provide those incentives, for target areas, like in this case, our downtown. But also, I think it's important to point out, the only thing that's being asked of us at this point in time is simply a letter of support for this. I mean, it doesn't obligate us. I mean, Mr. Psota noted that in his comments. This isn't obligating us to anything at this point. So there's, in some ways, Julia, you made the comment, I'll paraphrase it, but there's no harm, no foul as we sit here today in terms of supporting something like this. The details of it and the weeds and all that, we can get into that later. But, the purpose right now is to, and that's what Mr. Psota is asking, is for us to, support, the Horizon project. But, what the county's program might look like, it might be something different. But it's not obligating us to anything at this point in time.
If I could add,
Mr. Cannon.
if I could add quickly, I think what we need to understand is that the question here, I guess, is the justification for government incentives. We have already approved the Ross project for government incentives. We approved when SWED came before us, when the city of Salisbury came before us with the enterprise zone, we approved it. We agreed unanimously to endorse this project and give tax incentives. What they found out was it wasn't commercial, and of course the enterprise zone is reference to commercial only. But we approved incentives. So nothing's really changed. The only difference is that now they're asking for it to be on a residential project as opposed to a commercial project.
Good point.
That is different. The enterprise zone could be a residential zone. And
The
that would be
enterprise-
the same tax incentive. The Horizons is something different.
Right. Well, the enterprise zone is specifically for commercial. When they first applied for it, there were a few errors made down the line, including in ours, the council itself, whereas I believe it was overlooked by the fact this was only residential or primarily residential, and they had to pull back on that on the enterprise zone credits because that would have only been for commercial property.
But we could make this a residential zone.
That's what they are doing. They're saying, let's make it residential, and so that we can get that approved and that those benefits out there.
But the Horizon is a higher tax.
The only difference is
than residential in enterprise zone.
the schedule is a little bit different, and it's only based on whatever the potential future taxes could bring in for the county.
Councilwoman, the enterprise zone being the Maryland enterprise zone being a state program that benefits commercial development for a 10-year tax abatement program with a certain schedule that starts at 80% and goes down to 40% after 10 years exists. You can theoretically create the exact same thing that targets residential, same schedule, same year period, if you chose to. We, going and talking with developers and stuff, did not think that went far enough to entice business. And was it enough of a discount? And we didn't think it was. So we decided to go bigger. So I mean, that's.
But I think
Yeah.
tonight, we are only asking for a letter of support to enable us to continue having the conversation. It sounds like there are some different ideas on what the county portion of that would look like, should look like. So, you know, that's for a discussion for later down the road. But it could exactly mirror the enterprise zone if that's what your hopes are, and if, you know, you got the consensus on it.
Just trying to think how we can all work collaboratively with the city. If this is what your vision is, I don't want to be, you know, I think we need to support what our municipalities and our cities' long-term plans are.
Mr. Holloway?
Have you had any feedback from our Lower Shore delegation about this?
We've chatted with a few, and Carl Anderton has agreed to sponsor it for us.
Anyone else is on the Senate side?
Not yet. We haven't had the conversation with them yet.
Him talk to the Senate about this?
Not yet.
Really?
Not yet. But knowing if we have a letter of support from both councils, that most likely those types of bills don't really have issue getting through if both, you know, and this, across the state, you know, cities and counties go for this type of enabling legislation frequently.
So you're saying this is the initial part of this. So what would you be coming back to the county for if the county council agreed to do this?
Physically coming back, we wouldn't necessarily have to come back. We have draft resolutions and ordinances. If you wanted to talk about it a little more in detail and bat the idea around.
So if it was approved tonight, or by resolution, it'd be approved?
If it approved tonight to move forward, you would draft the resolution, then pass it at your next session.
Coming back discussing
If you wanted
anything else about the project?
If you wanted our opinions, or if you wanted to invite some developers or some business people to further the depth of the conversation, that's up to you, and we'd be happy to come back. But you wouldn't necessarily need that unless you invite.
So the decision, if we voted on it tonight, or whenever we voted on it, would be the final decision to give the tax abatement, correct?
No. So tonight or your next legislative session, all we're asking is for a resolution of support to have the conversation with the delegation,
Right.
with Annapolis.
That's what I meant.
To enable it.
It'd be final for us. He would have to go to the legislative.
Yes, at that point, but there's another conversation. So at a council meeting in April for the city council, we will have to adopt our own legislation, you know, with the specifics of the program of what we want to see in the city of Salisbury. We would ask again, if you're interested at the time, you know, what those specific criteria would be for the county if you'd like to move forward.
Well, Mr. Kitzrow said he wouldn't have to come back, so that's kind of confusing.
I think that before we even do a resolution, that we should know what they're going to send to Annapolis. Before we've sent a letter, a recommendation, we should know what they're sending to Annapolis on paper instead of just sitting here talking about it.
That's a good point, Mr.
Because if not, I mean, we sit here and agree to something, we don't even really know what we're agreeing to. Because like you said, Mr. Kittredge said don't have to come back to us once they get it to Annapolis. We should know what's going to Annapolis before we agree to it.
It's let me restate what I said earlier. If you would like to invite us back for further conversation, we'd love to come back and chat with you.
I think that would be a good idea, because there are a lot of questions, and we're getting more information every day on it, and it can be quite confusing. So I'd hate to get a consensus on the very first work session that we have. So I would like you all to come back.
We'd be happy to. In the packet that they got, did they get a copy of what we are sending to Annapolis?
There was not a copy of the proposed legislation that would go to Annapolis. There's a draft that can be in your inbox. It is It is a draft bill of legislation that
I'm
is
looking
approved.
at a map and a draft resolution.
Sure.
But no other information.
But so in theory, in concept, without having it in front of you, and we're happy to get you a copy, it is just enabling legislation that would allow the city and the county, if you so choose, to have whatever it is we decide down the road, those residential tax incentive is. So it's not saying it is exactly this Horizons program, and it's just saying City of Salisbury and Wicomico County, you can create a residential tax incentive.
Right now, you can't.
Right. So it's just enabling us to then come together again as two bodies to put that on paper and to codify it. So again, all we're asking is for a letter of support to allow Annapolis to have a further conversation.
I think a lot of it's already right before us. We know that there's a 20-year proposal for tax incentives, and we actually have the actual, as close as they get to the anticipated dollar values that will benefit the developer in the county. We have all that. We know there's going to be a 3-year evaluation and a 10-year sunset. That's really all we need to know.
Not really, John. Anytime we support anything that in legislation, we usually know what the legislation is before we send a letter of support, what they're proposing and what's going to be presented to the legislators. Right now, we really don't know what's going to be proposed. We listen to it in theory, but as far as the letter or what they're going to give to the delegation, we don't know.
Right. I believe that what they're asking, Ernie, is that our letter could simply say what our basis for support would be. And our basis would be we agree to the 20-year tax incentives, we agree to the 3-year evaluation period, and we agree to the 10-year sunset. We could say that right now. We don't have to say we agree, carte blanche with what the city's sending you. Our letter of support would itemize exactly what we would like to see done. And that being said, they've already said the county has that option. Am I close to correct there?
Yeah, I mean, it's with the executive. I didn't include it in the packet because it didn't necessarily have direct impact on this conversation. What was included was the resolution, the proposed application, and the ordinance that we would be submitting to our council in April, so that you could see the details of what that looked like. I wish I could just share it with you right now. It's very simple and frame, and I understand your reservation, Ernie, agreeing to something that you can't see, and I have no problem getting that to everybody, first thing. But it's very simple, and
Yeah, it doesn't even, our documentation isn't as detailed as what Councilman Cannon said. It is just, we're asking for enabling legislation to create a tax incentive program for residential properties. That's it. What then, in April, what we decide that is the purview of the city council and administration and the county council and administration. What the state will approve will not get into the weeds of what we have been spending a lot of time talking about tonight. It will just enable us to put a program together at a later date.
And as Mr. Cannon said earlier, we're doing this in terms of the enterprise zone. We're just, just large scale residential is not in that. It isn't allowed because the enterprise zone, it always has to be commercial, even though these are projects that are much larger than what we approve time and time again in the enterprise zone. So,
Ms. Holloway?
How does the tax abatement for the enterprise zone work in comparison with the figures on what you're doing here?
the enterprise zone is a 10-year abatement program. First 5 are 80%, and then it steps down from there over the next 5 at 70, 60, 50, 40, I think 30, and then it's over.
So this is a lot more lucrative, correct?
This is definitely a lot more lucrative, and as I mentioned earlier, we were considering mirroring the enterprise zone, but talking with some developers and stuff, it wasn't lucrative enough, and I don't want to. I can get into all the details on the science behind it, but you don't want to hear all of that.
So are you letting the developers drive this train, or is the city driving it?
We want to see economic development, and we have decided that the Horizon program as drafted would be a great engine and tool that we would have to incentivize and entice development, large-scale signature development in downtown Salisbury based off our conversations with local developers, regional and national private equity development. This type of program would be able to have them look at Salisbury to develop. So are we driving it or are they driving it? Or it's kind of a marriage in a sense of, this is what we're willing to give. Does that entice you enough to want to build here rather than someplace else? And we have perked some interest, definitely. So that's where we think we found the sweet spot.
Mr. Holloway, if the, like Ms. Acle, if the enterprise zone model is something you're interested in, you all can have that conversation in April, or whenever you want to have it. It doesn't have to be April. But this program is what the city is going to do and what the city is willing to do. The county can do what it wishes. But we need to go to the state to get the enabling legislation to have our own ordinances locally.
And like I said earlier, we have a lot more obligations than the city does when it comes to funding. And Bill, you know, God bless you for standing up for the schools like you do, and I know you have over the years. And every year when we go to budget, you know, it's a big argument about who's going to get funded. You go through it when you go to your budget process. But we have a lot more obligations than the city does, you know, so.
Yeah, you have a bigger budget, yes. But I think Mr. Cannon's point about this is a way to increase the tax base without increasing taxes. We can't do that all the time. And again, it's a glass half full model. The services that the county will have to provide to the folks, the 1,000 people that live in this district, would have limited impact on the county budget.
Maybe the city could get a better tax abatement, and then the county wouldn't have to be involved.
The county has to recognize, too, that it's revenue for the county, too. I mean, right now, with the Ross project alone, that's bringing in about $19,000 a year. If you follow through with this, and this project turns out to be as successful as we anticipate, it'll be $196,000 a year. If you want to increase your tax base, that's what you need to do. That's why the government incentive.
What would the figure be if we didn't give a tax abatement, John?
Well, it'll be $196,000, but the project probably will not happen, Joe. That's what we're saying. 10 years from now, if we don't do this, I would be willing to say 10 years from now, you're going to see nothing changing.
Well, ground's been broken.
That's why we have the enterprise zone. That's why I have tax incentives. There's a reason for that.
Mr. Hastings.
I know we're getting close to wrapping the conversation.
Yeah, we have to wrap this up.
But of course, just to point it out, you know, the city of Salisbury is our, you know, it's our county seat. The city and the county are together into one. You know, when the city does well, the county does well. As Acting Mayor Glantz mentioned, this is an increase. Potentially, this is going to increase our tax base without increasing the amount of taxes that the expenses that we have to pay. This is generally a really good thing, and we're not even talking about jobs, which is highly important given where we're going and what the economy that we're going to likely have. So, this is just one step, and I don't know what the timeline is, and maybe they can let us know as far as, you know, what the next steps, what that really looks like. But as a whole, you know, we as a county have got to do our best to support the city of Salisbury and the growth. And I don't doubt for a second that we can all come together and make sure we can tailor our own program or that would actually that fits all of our needs. But above all else, we got to make sure that we're working hard to support those who are already working hard, and the city of Salisbury is doing that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Do we have any more comments? All right, we would like to wrap this up. You guys have done a good job with your presentation, and I really appreciate your straightforwardness and your honesty. It sounds like we got a lot of reservations. Sounds like we have some people that want to go straight forward to it. I'm going to ask what you want to do. I would prefer to do another work session so that we can have a lot of this worked out. So, Mr. McCain, you want to go forward to give them the letter?
Well, more than fine providing a letter of support, because, I mean, that's all we're doing. I mean, you can't even talk about these programs if you don't get the state to basically give you that permission to have residential tax abatement. I mean, right now, we can't do that in the city. You know, we can't do it in the city. We can't do it in the county. So this is all that we're talking about here tonight. We're trying to solve this whole, you know, what our program's going to look like. That's for a later date. Right now, we're just The question is just, will we support a letter asking for the state to allow Wicomico County and the city of Salisbury to do residential tax abatements? And that's all we're
All
asking.
right, thank you. Mr. Davis.
I still like to see what's going up to Annapolis.
All right, Mr. Holloway. All right, Ms. Acle.
I would like to see exactly what's going to go up to Annapolis, just to review it and before we give our approval.
Mr. Hastings.
Does the timeline make sense to, for any delay or what? I don't know what parameters we have, but.
I literally could send this to everybody's inbox. We can have as much information prepared as quickly as if you'd like us to return. We would request to be on the next session. There's not, so we could have that. We could talk about this at your immediate next session. And if there's any additional specific questions, we can come prepared to answer those more directly. So we'd be willing to do
Mr.
that.
Cannon.
I think we all recognize that time is of the essence, especially since this is December and we know what we have to get to Annapolis in a very timely fashion. So I would think that at the very latest, by our next meeting, we have to have a vote, yes or no, as to whether or not we're going to send the letter and have the letter drafted for us by this next meeting based on what the city's presented. And I would assume that whatever you're sending to Annapolis, you have somewhat 90% of it already structured. I understand.
It's 100% structured. I just have to know if we're going to include Wicomico County in that bill or if it's just going to say City of Salisbury. It's written as Wicomico County and municipal corporations within Wicomico County, which would include Salisbury.
And isn't it part of what the emails we've already received and we already have?
Not the Maryland state enabling legislation, again, because it is a draft, and I don't want to be presumptuous to say like the county is already going to be included without us having this conversation.
All right,
Well,
and, the chair would like to see you back.
I mean, get that to us, and we could, I would be in favor of having that done. And also, I think.
No later than the next meeting.
I think we could have a letter ready by the next meeting as well.
Okay, we're going to have a lot of discussion, and thank you all. You did a very nice job.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Yes, sir. Now, at this time, we got a request to amend the fiscal year 2021 and 2025 capital improvement program for the budget to include funding for a new scale house at the Newland Park landfill. We have Mr. Whitelock and I guess Ms. Oland here.
Good evening.
Sorry, a little behind. If you would, go ahead and state your name and your position for the record.
Mark Whitelock, Deputy Director of Public Works.
Pam Olin, Director of Finance.
Thank you. Mr. Whitelock, you got the floor.
So we're proposing a replacement of the scale house in Newland Park landfill. The current scale house has been in place for 26 years. It is getting increasingly harder to fix the scales when they do break down. And the cost for that right now has nearly doubled in the last 4 years. This project had been proposed in prior year CIPs, had been funded, I think, up to $400,000. The design work is done, the bidding's been done, and certainly it came in well past the estimates for what we thought that would be. So the scales right now as they stand are in poor shape, and they're going to give up on us one of these days. The scale process is 42 weights an hour. It brings in nearly $3,000 an hour, and that would be lost revenue if those scales were to fail.
Yeah, Mr. Whitelock, I've heard the question a couple times before. We've got two scales right now, and then you want to put a brand new one in, and I think we were told that the two would be taken apart, destroyed. Is there any way to keep one of them as a backup?
No, because we can barely find parts for that scale, those scales now. I mean, they're that. The scale company basically told us they know of 3 of them that are in existence, and we own 2. So,
thank you.
So our proposal is we'll demolish those.
I'm going to ask a really simple question. What is a scale house? It's a building with 2 scales in it?
No, So you have a house in the middle, you have a scale on either side. One accepts incoming trucks to the landfill, one accepts outgoing trucks. So they get weighed coming in and they get weighed coming out. We did look at, I know there's been a question, we did look at putting in one scale. The problem with one scale is
Traffic.
the traffic is one side of it. The other side of it is if that scale were to be down for any reason, then the lost revenue would be, $3,000 an hour, or daily losses would be $26,000 if the scale was down just one day.
Yeah. So if the scale's down, are you not taking the trash in?
It's never happened.
Okay. Knock on wood. Thank you.
Because the only way that we could do that, we couldn't, the way the waste stream works in Wicomico County is it would be nearly impossible to not take waste. We would have to, we would have to call administration. They would have to get with you guys. We can't waive fees. So something would have to be done, whether it be flat feeing or something like that in the interim, but thank God it's never happened.
All right, thank you.
So moving forward, what would happen is we would put in the new scales. The old scales would be demolished. The old scale house would be demolished. All that would be moved out of the way. For that site where it currently sits now is proposed a rainy day site. So when it rains on the landfill, we wouldn't be sending the small trucks up on the landfill because it's more problems. They get up there, they get stuck, they get in the way. That we would divert these trucks to this rainy day site where we could handle that off the landfill site itself.
Okay. Have any questions?
Yes.
Davis?
The design of the new scales, will they be in line with the future development of the landfill?
Yes.
Because the expansion of the landfill, will these new scales be placed in a good location for the expansion of the landfill, which is across the street?
I'd like to say that they would be in the optimum spot. The problem is we have limited space right there that we can work with. We believe we have placed them in a way that will work best for that. Because the theory would be in the expansion of the landfill that Brick Hill Road would be closed from the collector road to the current scale house. And then all that landfill would come across Brick Hill Road. This is set off at an angle that faces into that, so incoming traffic would be going that way.
Okay. Any more questions?
Could I ask just for one point of
Mr.
clarification? All of the money that's being asked for tonight is to come from the enterprise fund for solid waste, isn't that
Correct.
right? I just want to make sure.
And there's just one thing I wanted to, there's a draft legislation in your information. And the one thing I wanted to note is that in two spots in it, it references and capital budget. This is an we're proposing this as an operating budget only amendment because it's going in the operating budget. It's not creating a capital project. In talking with Mark, this is something that can be 100% encumbered before June 30th, 2021. So it wouldn't need to carry over into and become a multi-year project. So like the operating budgets of everybody else that have capital sections, this isn't going in that capital budget section which is like 181 to 185 in the budget. It's literally just going in the operating budget of the landfill. So I would want to remove two places where it says and capital budget. I just wanted you to be aware of that, so when you see it, that's the reason why I'm proposing we don't modify the capital budget, because we're not actually creating a capital project. We're creating an operating capital item.
So the exact figure is $1,436,250? Okay, and that's from the enterprise fund with the changes that you just mentioned?
Yep, and it's just in the heading of the resolution, and it's in the third whereas. We would be taking out the words "and capital budget." It would just be amending the operating budget.
Well, I'm glad she brought that up because I'm not sure about that. If you'll look in the charter, the definition for capital project, and also if you'll look at section 704G, of the charter, it talks about amending the capital budget. I mean, to me, this would be a capital item.
But it's not.
I think.
It's not in the capital section of the budget.
Well,
It's
it
going-
should be, though. I mean, that's the
No.
point. If you want to follow the charter, I think it should be.
No, because everybody has, then we've got all kinds of budget items throughout the county. You have capital sections of the budget in your operating. You buy vehicles, you buy equipment, you build a building because you can get it done within a year. The capital budget is typically long-term projects. This is a 1 year, heck, a 6-month project that we're looking at trying to do. So again, my recommendation would be we would remove 2 and capital budgets.
I think we better look at the charter and think that one over. That's just my suggestion. And
So we have to have a work session on this, or we have to put it to a public hearing?
It definitely has to go to a public hearing, and, you know, from what I'm hearing, I believe that we can still schedule that for December the 15th. It would only require 1 week worth of action.
Without having to do another public hearing to discuss Mr. Taylor's concerns?
I think that it's probably a good idea for Mr. Taylor to
I don't
work
know that
out.
what I'm suggesting would hold anything up, frankly. You know.
Other than the language in the resolution.
Yeah, well, it would
we would need to
obviously
work
be
that
some
out before
language
the
in
15th.
I'm thinking of the timing.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of the timing.
Does that being
Mr.
an-
Holloway?
Does that being an enterprise fund have anything to do with that? The way that formula works out?
No, because
Okay.
again, if you look in any of the sections within the budgets, and if you look in your budget books, the capital budget that's referenced is, again, I've kind of looked at it a couple times, it's like page 181 to 185.
Yeah.
And that literally has the title, capital budget. The rest of the sections where everybody else has, that's your operating budget. The account numbers that we're referencing here, they're operating budget account numbers. They are not capital budget account numbers because they're staying within Project Fund 51. They are not going to the capital budget fund. They're staying in the solid waste fund, thus they are operating.
And that makes perfect sense, you know, and it's a short-term item.
Project.
I mean, again,
It's
it's
a
a
6-month
large,
item.
it's a large dollar
Amount.
short-term item.
Right.
But it's like buying a large dollar item piece of equipment that you spend.
I would say, you know.
But let's be realistic. This is not a short-term capital item. It's going to be around for a long time.
But it's
And that's the nexus here that gets you into the charter. And so I think that's why you have
But
to.
equipment's around for a long period of time, and we
The only
put that
thing
in the
that's-
operating budget.
The only thing she's talking about short-term is she's trying to get it in this year, which is fine. I mean, I'm not arguing against that. I'm just simply saying that if we're going to do it the way the charter reads, this would be a capital item. It's a $1.4 million item. I mean, we're not talking peanuts here.
Mr. President.
I think it's a discussion that Mr. Taylor probably should have with Mr. Wilbur,
Yes.
sort it out, and then
Yeah.
it's not something for the
We need the
council to
scale
do.
house.
Yeah, we can do that, because obviously we're not going to work it out tonight.
No.
So we don't need to vote on this. So if there's any more questions,
Yeah,
Mr. Holloway?
Is there, as I mentioned earlier about the price of materials, is there any escalation clause in this contract or?
So we bid this out, actually, I believe it may have been last year or early spring, something like that. It has increased by $20,000. We called the contractor and we upgraded, and that's what they said. There is a certain contingency that's built into this, though, is anything would not require any more funding or us coming back to council.
Okay.
It's a one-time
And
figure.
just for the benefit of anybody that's listening, this is in the landfill fund, so we are not borrowing money to do this.
Yep.
It's coming out of tipping fees
Correct.
and our landfill operating fund, so it's not something we have to go to the bond market or something we have to increase taxes over or anything like that.
The money's already there.
It's money's
Okay,
there.
any more questions? Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
All right, next on the agenda, we have Mr. David Fitzgerald from Emergency Management doing a presentation on NIMS training classes for elected officials. Mr. Psota, you can come up here with him.
Good evening, Council. David Fitzgerald, Emergency Services, Emergency Management and Safety Coordinator. I spoke with Ms. Hurley, and she just said that the council was interested in the just a very short briefing on NIMS, which is the National Incident Management System, and Instant Command. The way our county structure is set up with an executive and a council, what happens during an emergency, which you're all familiar with, is our emergency services director and our county executive would come to you for extension past the 7 days for the state of, or declaration of emergency for the county. So the council is really not the day-to-day operating, so you really don't have to take any classes. You're not mandated by FEMA. It doesn't affect our grants for council. But for your informational and knowledge purposes, if you are interested in taking the 2 classes that Director Shipley and I recommend that you would take to get some institutional knowledge, is the ICS 700, and we can provide you the online links. Again, as much as you want to learn, you could look at the links, you could download the manual, look at the book. If you want to take the test, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine too. So we can provide those links. The other course is the class that we would teach in the EOC, and why we would bring you to the Emergency Operations Center, just to show you what it's about if you've never been there before. And this class is not based online, it is a taught class, and we could just do a briefing, if you will, if the council or certain members are interested in that. And the reason it's a face-to-face class, it is geared to exactly how the students operate. So in this case, if it's the council, we would talk directly on how the county EOC operates, how we interact with the municipalities, and all our partners. So that's what I have for you this evening. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer, or if you want to, I'm going to provide Ms. Hurley tomorrow the links so you can look at the online classes, and you could download the course manual. The G course is about 85-page manual. If you want to skim through it, and if you want more information from Emergency Services, we'll be glad to do that for you.
Okay. Do we have any questions for Mr. Fitzgerald?
Yes, we don't have to take a test, do we?
No, sir. No.
That's all I have.
Just institutional knowledge. If you'd like to gain more knowledge about these classes and operating things, we'll be glad to provide that for you.
It shows you how the counties operate during an emergency.
That was what the G class would be, and we would suggest you come out to the Emergency Operations Center. We set it up, and we show you the different rooms and how we use them.
The Operations Center.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hastings?
I just want to say I really appreciate you bringing this to us. This is really, these kind of things, I love learning more. And when I attended my very first MACO session, they were actually, one of the classes was talking about the more that the county, more that local governments can do to be informed and on these kinds of, as a smattering of different things, but to be able to lower their insurance costs by more certifications or more knowledge base among elected officials and others. So I doubt we'd be able to do much as far as our insurance, but I do love the idea of continuing to make sure that we know we're prepared, and I love the idea of getting more information and understanding how we could be supportive. So thank you for bringing that.
Any more questions? Mr. Davis?
Do you guys have a mobile incident command unit?
We have a mobile command, the county has a mobile command vehicle, yes, sir.
Is that big unit that sits out there to the landfill?
It's been stored at the landfill in the solid waste storage. Lately, we've been keeping it, especially with COVID, we've been keeping it at the EOC area detention center. We keep it plugged in, that way we can go out daily, and we're doing some maintenance to it. But yes, it's normally kept at solid waste in the pole barn.
It'd probably be a good idea for council members to attend some type of orientation so that they know what's going on out to the emergency center and the vehicles that we have out there and what every job is. So I think it's a good idea.
Glad to have you.
All right, any more questions?
I just have one quick question.
Ms. Hurley?
So the online course, is that a self-paced course, or is there like a certain time period in which you should get it accomplished?
It's self-paced.
Self-paced.
It's self-paced. It does have its glitches like anything else on the computer. It may start you over and you just need to fast forward back through the slides to where you are, but you can take as long as you want to look at it. And you can also download the slides and just look at them without having internet access.
Yep. All right. Thank you all.
You're very welcome.
Now I have an update on the, I'm sorry?
He said,
Not to go
he told me
anywhere.
Don't go anywhere. Okay, we have an update on the CARES Act funding with Mr. John Psota and Mr. David Fitzgerald, I guess.
And Tony Rudy and Lori Carter is some technical difficulties when they did the switchover. So this is a good opportunity, as can happen in these types of situations where we have different funding sources and different funds that come in, different grants. This is a good opportunity to give you a refresher on what's going on regarding the CARES funding. So as a reminder, the CARES stands for the Coronavirus Aid Relief and Economic Security Grant money. It's a federal, it was federal monies forwarded to the state, to the counties, to relieve COVID issues. And the expenditures that municipalities, local fire, EMS, health department, other partners have had in mediating COVID expenses. So for Wicomico County, we received over $18 million. Basically, initially in two tranches. The first tranche went to all the monies went to the health department through from the state's Office of Budget Management. So the health department is the bank, if you will, for the county. So half of that, $9 million, went to SWED, if you recall, for an outstanding business relief program that was expeditiously and efficiently run through SWED by the executive director, Dave Ryan, where in short order, and quite frankly, I believe the envy of the state in our ability to get that money out quickly, we again got over $9 million out to 900 businesses. The other $9 million plus then is distributed through the municipalities, again, local fire companies, EMS, and stakeholders as they mediate the cost of COVID. Now, for the counties, from the county's perspective, all of the funneling for those expenses are going through Dave Fitzgerald. He has done an outstanding job from the very beginning. As a city manager in Fruitland, I wore him out as we made expenses, and because there's always that fear that as a manager, when you're making expenses, that's going to be covered somewhere, because there's some degree there's a disbelief in the governmental system that it's actually going to work, and it actually did. And Mr. Fitzgerald spearheads everything, coordinates it between the health department. The health department's doing an outstanding job, an unbelievable job with their staff. Lori Brewster, the things that she has done personally, that she's 24/7, 365 on this. But along there, again, is Mr. Fitzgerald. He coordinates with federal partners. Also part of this funding stream is FEMA money. He'll explain, he'll touch on that. But we wanted to also relieve you you hear, okay, December 30th, it's got to be spent by December 30th. So we want to have you understand, we got this. We account for everything. There's going to be an accounting at the end of the day. So we've got the 18 million, 9 went to SWED, 9 is going to the health department, and is being, and our expenses and local expenses are going through Dave as he goes through the health department. Then we also have additional CARES funding that we've received. The airport, as you recall in your passing of legislation approving the acceptance of grants, Tony Rudy will explain what the FAA CARES grant money he's received and what he intends to do with it. For Lori Carter, when Jesse Drewer was up here earlier, a question that was not asked that's pretty important, where you have basically 3 pots of money that has come to planning, zoning, community development for dissemination for rental assistance. In that, the first grant was $1.1 million. Then they followed it up with $900,000 grant, and then, as you approved tonight, a $300,000 grant. Well, the first two grants come with a timeline on when you can spend that. The first one, I believe, is you have to use it within 2 years. The second one is a year and a half, and this $300,000, they want you to get it out the door right now. Along with that, that's why they've lessened those restrictions to qualify to get that money out. Those first two grants have created, if you will, a little bit of a bottleneck in trying to get that money out. This $300,000 helps get it out the door and bring relief to those that need it. So, having said that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Fitzgerald.
Dave?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Psota. I echo his comments. The health department's been great to work with. He mentioned Ms. Brewster, but also Brandy Wink, their deputy director of administration. She's the key contact there for this. She is managing these funds directly, like I'm assisting the county and municipalities. So we'll start off at the top. Is the easiest way to do it. So when we have an expenditure, we use FEMA funds first, FEMA Part B, which is emergency protective measures, just like we would a hurricane, snowstorm, anything else. The reason we do that is two reasons. One, it leverages the funds. We don't automatically just spend CARES funds, so it makes that CARES money go a little further. The second thing it does is after a disaster, FEMA, DHS, Department of Homeland Security, and the President can take those funds, and 3 years after, you've heard about the hazard mitigation plan. You heard last month that Mr. Cropper was here, Marilyn Williams was here, talking about the flooding plan and the hazard mitigation plan. Any monies that you've applied for that Part B, you can get a percentage 3 years from now. So it's two reasons to use the FEMA money first. One is to leverage more grant money 3 years down the road, and second, to make that CARES money go a little further. So with the CARES money directly, what we have done is it covers the 25% that FEMA does not reimburse. FEMA is a 75% reimbursement. So every time we get a FEMA reimbursement, the CARES chips in the other 25%, so we basically get a 100% reimbursement for expenditures. These expenditures are things like personal protective equipment, sanitation supplies, overtime, those type of things that are emergency protective measures that we've done. So the other thing we did special is we applied to FEMA and were approved for special feeding privileges. So we have provided, we mean Wicomico County as a team, have provided 69,000 pounds of food to the food bank, and that has been covered 100%, 75% by FEMA and 25% by CARES. So they have just concluded over the last 3 months 69,000 pounds of food that the food bank has distributed and being fully covered. The other CARES funds that we've managed is, as Mr. Psota said, is we've helped the municipalities, again, just like we do a snowstorm, a hurricane. I've worked endless hours on the phone the most recent days with Fruitland to make sure they get their reimbursement in for both FEMA and CARES. City of Salisbury, they've gotten theirs as well. Same thing, the emergency protective measures and PPE, et cetera. So we work with the municipalities. The other part of the CARES that we are helping coordinate with the county is, again, getting a good supply of personal protective equipment. I worked most of the day today on making sure, as Mr. Psota said, we're working with Ms. Wink to make sure these funds are spent in a very responsible and prudent manner to make sure we have personal protective equipment for the county staff, municipalities, the fire, EMS, law enforcement, et cetera, in a stockpile so that when they need it, if this becomes another heavy like we had in March and April where we're using a lot of PPE, we have that readily available. It's not short supply. We've also helped out the stadium to prepare for hopefully a baseball event in the spring or when they open back up. Additionally with the Civic Center to make sure they're prepared and our recreation facilities are prepared, making sure we have the sanitizer and the things we need to open our facilities back up in a safe manner, generate the economic revenue to the county. The other thing that we are doing is preparing for vaccination clinics. So we are making sure that we have the supplies. We had a good trial run when we did the testing at Purdue Stadium, the COVID testing. Remember, we did that in March and April. So we are making sure we have supplies, again, working with the health department, with Ms. Brewster and Ms. Wink, that we have supplies available for this vaccination that we're going to have to do coming up. So those are the items that we have concentrated on using the CARES funds, as well as the disinfection area out at the Naylor Mill Road complex that is used by everyone, county staff, municipalities, Board of Ed. It's open. It's a county, true county facility that any county person in the county that needs to use it, shore transit, et cetera. And that's, again, reimbursed. All the chemicals, everything is being reimbursed through CARES and through FEMA.
So I was told something about the CARES funding was buying an ambulance for every fire company?
I'm only very briefly familiar with that because that did not come through our office. Those requests went direct to Ms. Wink. But I will tell you that what I know is most of the fire companies did receive an ambulance through the CARES fund, but that did not come through the county or the Department of Emergency Services. That was handled directly between the fire companies and the health department.
Okay.
Did the fire companies get any other funding through the CARES Act, operating funds or anything like that?
They are getting, we are putting a stockpile, Parsonsburg Fire Company. I want to compliment them. They are creating a storage area at Parsonsburg for the east side of the county so that we have a supply of personal protective equipment on the east side, and I applaud them for taking the initiative to work directly with the health department on that. So that's, and they are also going to be recipients of all this PPE that we're getting. So we deliver, I have a spreadsheet here, Jerry Cooper, I'll give him a little shout out from Fruitland. He does a yeoman's job every week. He contacts every fire company, gets an inventory of personal protective equipment, sanitation supplies. We look at the inventory, and when somebody needs something, we get it delivered the next Monday out to them. So that's going to be what they're going to get, Mr. Holloway, is to make sure we have the supplies. And again, Parsonsburg, I applaud them for coordinating that east side to have a little supply stock directly over on the east side. If they got any county or any funds direct through the health department, I'm not familiar.
Yeah, I know their fundraising efforts have been hampered this year, so.
Ms. Acle?
I just had a quick question about the food distribution. And is that percent of that is being directly distributed to the Maryland Food Bank?
Maryland Food Bank purchased those boxes, and they distribute those. FEMA has strict guidelines. They worked with their partners, such as Mark Thompson and Ms. Bradley, our local management board director, these pop-up events that were directed to COVID affected people. So our funds, the county funds that were reimbursed, were paid direct to the food bank, and Ms. Jennifer Small at the food bank managed where those went in Wicomico County, and they had to stay in Wicomico County. She had to sign an agreement that none of that food left Wicomico County.
I just had a concern because there were no pop-up, maybe one pop-up event in District 2. They were more concentrated to the city, and we had some shortages of the food bank distributed in Wicomico. So, just want to make sure that was.
And I can bring that to Ms. Small's attention. I'll be glad to bring that to her attention.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I was remiss that I just saw in my notes when you mentioned food is we're also, with the CARES Fund, able to reimburse the Board of Education approximately $130,000 because they initiated a food project where they went out when they were also, when school was closed, March, April, May, they increased above their USDA food allotment, and we were able to get that reimbursed to balance their budget, their over expenditure.
And you were able to provide them with the PPE equipment and everything they needed?
Them,
okay.
If they asked for it, if they requested it, and we had it available, they got it.
Okay. Right, thanks.
At the last meeting, we had Ms. Brewster here to give us an update. And earlier in the day, the governor tweeted something about Hardwire donating PPE to fire departments across the state. And I asked her if Wicomico was a part of that, and she didn't know. Do you know anything about that?
They did not donate anything direct to the county. If they did it direct to the fire companies, we're not aware of that.
If they do and you hear about it, will you let us know? Because we would like to thank them. As anybody that contributes to the fire companies, it's a great deal because they work hard. The volunteers really work hard to do fundraising, and they need this equipment.
We send out the weekly email for the EMS PPE, so I'll just include that in the email, just poll the fire company EMS captains, and if they do, I'll send it forward up to Ms. Hurley.
All right, appreciate that. Anything else? Mr. Rudy?
Good evening. So as you're aware, the
Thank you, Dave.
the airport got approval from the FAA to use some of the CARES funding for our vehicle that we're purchasing. And if you remember, the MAA grant that we received was $315,000, so we were short $390,251. So FAA did give us approval to use that. That will not be, we won't request reimbursement until the truck's delivered in October of next year.
It'll be October of next year before we get it?
Yes,
Okay.
it's a full year to.
It does take a while.
Yes. So we did submit reimbursement number 1 for operating and maintenance expenses. And the time frame for that, we were able to go back to the end of January through, we took a time period through April 30th, which was manageable. Our airport accountant, Matt Moore, I'll give him a lot of credit because he spent a lot of time finding old receipts, digging those up. FAA wants to see every single receipt. They also want spreadsheets outlining what the expenses are. So he, with help of the finance department, and he was working with payroll. Unfortunately, we did not get salaries submitted in reimbursement number 1. There's just, there was kind of too much work on their end to pull that together. But we did submit for $199,548.86. FAA did a quick review of it. They found only $523 that was ineligible for reimbursement. So we adjusted our total to $199,025, and they approved that. We're expecting payment by December 5th. Currently, we're working on reimbursement number 2. Also, well, that'll be from a period between, give me a moment here. Between May 1st and August 31st, and we're also working with the salary reimbursement from February 1st to June 30th. We'll be submitting those in the next couple of weeks. I'm not sure of the totals of those offhand, but because of the complexity and the time it takes to dig through these files, pull that information together, I think going forward, we're planning on about once every 6 months submitting for reimbursement. We don't want to go too long without getting funds back. However, just the time it takes to go through the process, it makes more sense to do it a little less often than repeatedly. So by March will be our next cycle, and that'll bring us up through, I think, the end of either end of January or so we'll be more caught up by that time.
Okay. Yep. Anything else?
And that's as far as the reimbursements go.
Yeah.
We're still working with FAA for our development projects that we've talked about. We've got I'd say a little better feeling. We don't have guidance yet from them yet, but we've got a better feeling of what projects are going to be considered for reimbursement as a development project. We think they're going to be following the typical FAA guidelines as far as the design work, the environmental work that needs to be done, any criteria they have for buildings, such as the ARF station we want to build. We think they're going to hold us to their normal standards for those types of projects. Other things we want to do, it looks like we might be successful getting those done, and I think they're looking at those more of normal maintenance items rather than necessarily development. But there will be, I think we may have to make some revisions down the road as we find out what they're going to be funding for us.
Okay. Ms. Acle, I think you're waiting to speak.
I had a question about the funding for nonprofits. The CARES funding for nonprofit reimbursement for overtime?
I don't know to what degree nonprofits are covered, to be honest with you.
We can check into that. You can tell me which nonprofit it is. We'll see if they're eligible for FEMA.
Maybe it's something through the state. I saw the advertisement on the county website for nonprofits to apply for overtime funding.
I defer to Dave, so. Dave?
We'll check. There is some nonprofits that may be eligible for FEMA Part B if they're doing emergency protective measures. There's our emergency.
Mr. Fitzgerald, can you go to the podium mic? Because the recorder needs to pick you up.
Thank you, Ms. Hurley.
Thank you. Sorry about that. We can check. Some nonprofits are eligible for the FEMA Part B if they're providing emergency protective measures. If there's CARES nonprofit funds, I'm not familiar with that, Ms. Acle, but if there are certain times that nonprofits, if they're providing emergency protective measures for COVID, may be eligible, and we can check that.
This RFP is for overtime funds for organizations already established and working within the county as a reimbursement for PPE and supplies and.
I believe that's a local management board initiative. That would be Ms. Bradley.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Mr. Rudy's already excused himself. Does anybody have any more questions? Any questions for Mr. Rudy? All right, is that all?
I'll conclude with a couple things. A shout out to the hardworking county employee to a person. In addition to everything that they do, living under also the protocols of COVID, as we all are, what you've heard in disseminating this $9 million and what SWED has done, it's kind of what SWED has been able to harness the ability to efficiently get it out the door. What we've been able to do through Dave Fitzgerald and the health department, we have been able to fill out the forms, keep track of everything, do it all, and also continue with the continuity of running the government. It has been an absolutely exciting thing to see and an unbelievable thing to see. So I know we all appreciate it, but we can't say it enough. So I thank them all.
Thank you, Mr. Psota. You have any more questions? All right, need a motion.
Move.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much.